It started as just another inspiring interview on The Tonight Show, until the woman making it possible revealed she was about to lose the gift she had spent her life sharing with others. The Tonight Show studio buzzed with its usual energy as Jimmy Fallon prepared for one of his most meaningful interviews of the week. Tonight's guest was Dr. Chen, a deaf physicist who had just won the Nobel Prize for her groundbreaking work in quantum mechanics. It was exactly the kind of story that made Jimmy love his job: triumph over adversity, breaking barriers, and proving that limitations exist only in our minds. Standing quietly beside the interview area was Lisa Williams, a 45-year-old ASL interpreter whose graceful hands had been translating hope into sign language for over 20 years. Lisa had worked with presidents, Supreme Court justices, and countless celebrities, but she approached every assignment with the same quiet dignity and unwavering focus that had made her one of the most sought-after interpreters in the country. Lisa was tall and elegant, with auburn hair pulled back in a professional bun, and wearing the kind of simple black clothing that allowed her to fade into the background while making communication possible. Her hands were her instruments, and she treated them with the respect of a concert pianist, keeping them conditioned, flexible, and ready to transform spoken words into visual poetry. As Jimmy settled into his chair across from Dr. Chen, Lisa took her position slightly to the side, where both the guest and the camera could see her clearly. This was her usual spot, her comfort zone, the place where she had facilitated thousands of conversations between hearing and deaf individuals over the years. Dr. Chen, Jimmy began with his characteristic warmth, congratulations on this incredible achievement. A Nobel Prize at 35. That's extraordinary by any measure. Lisa's hands moved with practiced grace, translating Jimmy's words into the flowing movements of American Sign Language. She had been Dr. Chen's preferred interpreter for major interviews over the past 2 years, and they had developed the kind of professional rhythm that made communication seem effortless. Dr. Chen signed her response with animated enthusiasm, her face bright with the joy of someone who had always loved talking about her work. Lisa's voice carried her words to the studio audience. Thank you, Jimmy. I've always believed that the universe doesn't care if you can hear the equations. It only cares if you can understand them. The interview progressed beautifully. Dr. Chen spoke about her childhood, how teachers had initially discouraged her from pursuing physics because they couldn't imagine how a deaf student would succeed in a field so dependent on collaboration and verbal discussion. She shared stories of late nights in the laboratory, of colleagues who learned basic sign language to work with her more effectively, of the moment she realized her research could revolutionize how we understand the fundamental nature of reality. Jimmy was in his element, asking thoughtful questions, creating moments of laughter, drawing out the human story behind the scientific achievement. The audience was captivated, many of them learning about deaf culture and the physics world for the first time, watching in fascination as Lisa's hands painted pictures in the air with every translated word. But as they reached the middle of the interview, something shifted in Lisa's expression. Her hands continued their fluid translation, but there was a subtle change in her posture, a tightness around her eyes that suggested she was fighting some internal battle. What advice would you give to young deaf students who want to pursue careers in science? Jimmy asked, leaning forward with genuine interest. Dr. Chen began signing her response with passion, talking about determination, community, and the importance of finding mentors who see ability rather than disability. But as Lisa began to translate, something unprecedented happened. Her hands stopped, not a pause, not a moment of confusion, but a complete cessation of movement. Lisa's hands, which had been dancing through the air just seconds before, fell to her sides as if suddenly disconnected from her mind. Dr. Chen noticed immediately, concern filling her expression as she looked between Lisa and Jimmy. The studio audience, sensing something was wrong, began to murmur quietly. "Lisa," Jimmy said gently, rising from his chair, "are you okay?" Lisa looked at Jimmy, then at Dr. Chen, then at the studio audience. When she spoke, her voice carried a weight that made everyone in that studio understand that something profound was happening. "Jimmy," she said, her voice steady despite the tears that had begun forming in her eyes, "I need to tell you something, and I need Dr. Chen to hear it too." Jimmy walked closer to where Lisa stood, his entertainer's instincts telling him that this was one of those moments that could change everything. "What's going on, Lisa?" Lisa took a deep breath, gathering strength for words she'd been dreading to say out loud. "This is my last interpretation," she said simply. The words hung in the air like a confession. Jimmy's expression shifted from confusion to concern as he began to understand that this wasn't about a career change or retirement. "Your last interpretation?" Jimmy asked softly. "Lisa, what do you mean?" Dr. Chen, who could read lips well enough to follow the conversation, was watching intently, her scientific mind trying to process the implications of what she was witnessing. "For 22 years, Lisa began, her voice growing stronger as she found her courage, "I've been the voice for people who communicate with their hands. I've translated wedding vows, Nobel Prize acceptance speeches, Supreme Court arguments, and thousands of everyday conversations. My hands have been the bridge between two worlds." Jimmy was listening intently, his full attention focused on Lisa. "But 6 months ago," Lisa continued, "I was diagnosed with something called Usher syndrome. It's a genetic condition that causes progressive hearing loss and eventually blindness. I've been losing my hearing gradually over the past year, and soon I'll lose my sight as well." The studio fell completely silent. Even Dr. Chen, who couldn't hear the words, could see the pain and resignation in Lisa's expression. "Lisa," Jimmy said, his voice thick with emotion, "I had no idea. How long have you known?" "I've suspected for over a year," Lisa admitted. "The hearing loss started slowly. Difficulty picking up certain frequencies, trouble hearing in noisy environments. I thought it was just age, stress, maybe too many years of wearing headphones. But when it started affecting my work, when I began missing parts of conversations I was supposed to interpret, I knew I had to get tested." Jimmy reached out and gently took Lisa's hands, the hands that had spent decades creating meaning from silence, building bridges across the divide between different ways of experiencing the world. "Why didn't you say anything before now?" Jimmy asked. Lisa's smile was sad but brave. "Because this job, this calling, it's not just what I do, it's who I am. For 22 years, I've been the person who makes communication possible. I've been the one who ensures that deaf individuals can participate fully in conversations, interviews, legal proceedings, medical consultations. Taking that away from me feels like losing my identity." Dr. Chen began signing something, her movements urgent and emotional. Lisa watched her hands and translated. "She's saying that she wants to know why I'm telling you this now during her interview." Jimmy looked between the two women, understanding that this moment was bigger than television, bigger than entertainment, bigger than anything he had ever hosted before. "Why now, Lisa?" Jimmy asked. Lisa wiped her eyes and looked directly at Dr. Chen as she spoke. "Because Dr. Chen's story reminded me of something I had forgotten. She just said that the universe doesn't care if you can hear the equations, only if you can understand them. And I realized that maybe the same is true for love, for service, for the work we do to help each other." She turned to address the studio audience. "I won't be able to interpret much longer. My hearing is declining rapidly, and my vision is starting to go too. But for 22 years, I've had the privilege of being part of thousands of conversations that mattered. I've been present for some of the most important moments in people's lives, and I've helped ensure that language barriers, whether spoken or signed, never prevented human connection. Jimmy was crying openly now, and he wasn't alone. Throughout the studio, audience members, crew, and even the camera operators were wiping their eyes. "Lisa," Jimmy said, "what you've done, what you've dedicated your life to, it's incredible. You've been a bridge, a translator, a facilitator of human connection. That's not something you're losing. That's something you've given to the world permanently." Dr. Chen began signing again, this time more slowly so that Lisa could follow. Despite her declining hearing, Lisa translated. "She says that in physics, energy is never destroyed. It just changes form. She says my work, my service, my dedication to communication, that energy doesn't disappear when I stop interpreting. It lives on in every conversation I made possible, every barrier I helped remove, every person who felt heard because I was there." Jimmy turned to address the camera directly. "Ladies and gentlemen, what we're witnessing right now is something extraordinary. Lisa Williams has spent over 2 decades ensuring that communication is accessible to everyone. She's been present for some of the most important conversations in our society, and she's done it with grace, skill, and complete selflessness." He looked back at Lisa. "And now, as she faces her own communication challenges, I think it's time we showed her the same dedication she's shown to others." Jimmy walked to his desk and picked up his phone. "Lisa, you've spent 22 years learning to communicate in ways that serve other people. Tonight, I want to ask the audience and everyone watching at home to learn something new. I want them to learn sign language." He held up his phone, which displayed a basic sign language app. "Right now, we're all going to learn how to say thank you in ASL, because Lisa Williams deserves to be thanked in the language she knows best." The energy in the studio transformed immediately. Jimmy called Dr. Chen forward to help teach the sign, and together they showed the audience the proper hand movements for expressing gratitude in American Sign Language. "Everyone in the studio, everyone watching at home," Jimmy announced, "learn this sign, practice it, use it. Because there are Lisa Williams in your community too. Interpreters, advocates, bridge builders, who make communication possible for people who need these services." As 300 audience members practiced the sign for thank you, something magical happened. Lisa found herself surrounded not just by the sounds of clapping hands, but by the visual language she had devoted her life to sharing. The entire studio was communicating with her in her native language, showing appreciation in a way that transcended spoken words. Dr. Chen approached Lisa and began signing something private, something meant just for her. Lisa watched carefully, her eyes filling with fresh tears as she understood the message. "What did she say?" Jimmy asked. Lisa translated. "She said that she's going to dedicate her Nobel Prize acceptance speech to all the interpreters, advocates, and bridge builders who make it possible for people like her to share their gifts with the world. She said that my work made her work possible." Jimmy looked around the studio at the audience still practicing their signs, at Dr. Chen and Lisa standing together, at the cameras capturing a moment that would be remembered long after the show ended. "Lisa," he said, "I want to make you an offer. Your interpreting career may be ending, but your service to the deaf community doesn't have to. Would you consider working with The Tonight Show to make our program more accessible? Would you help us ensure that every show, every interview, every segment is available to deaf viewers?" Lisa's eyes went wide. "Jimmy, I'm going blind. How could I possibly help with television production?" "Because," Jimmy replied, "accessibility isn't just about being able to see or hear the content. It's about understanding the heart behind it. It's about knowing what barriers exist and how to remove them. You've spent 22 years understanding those barriers better than anyone. Dr. Chen began signing enthusiastically, and Lisa translated with a smile. She says that the best consultants are people who have lived the challenges they're trying to solve. Jimmy nodded. Exactly. Lisa, you understand accessibility not as a concept, but as a lived experience. You know what works, what doesn't work, and what innovations could make communication even better for everyone. The studio erupted in applause, but this time it was different. This time, 300 people were also signing "Thank you" in unison, creating a visual symphony of gratitude that Lisa could see and understand even as her hearing continued to fade. Lisa was overwhelmed, unable to speak through her tears of gratitude and relief. For months, she had been dreading the end of her career, the loss of her identity, the fear of being unable to contribute to the community she loved. But in one night, Jimmy Fallon had shown her that endings could be beginnings, that limitations could inspire innovation, and that service takes many forms. Dr. Chen stepped forward and signed something directly to the camera. Lisa translated. She wants everyone watching to know that this is what inclusion really looks like. Not just accommodating differences, but celebrating them. Not just removing barriers, but building bridges. Jimmy looked into the camera for his final words of the evening. Tonight, Lisa Williams reminded us that communication is about more than words. It's about connection, understanding, and the willingness to learn new ways of reaching each other. Lisa has spent her career making sure that no one is left out of the conversation. Now it's our turn to make sure that Lisa is never left out of ours. The show ended with something unprecedented. Complete silence from the studio audience, accompanied by 300 people signing "Thank you" in perfect unison. It was a moment of communication that transcended sound, reaching across the divide between hearing and deaf to create understanding in its purest form. 3 months later, Lisa Williams joined The Tonight Show as their Director of Accessibility Innovation. Working closely with deaf consultants, technology experts, and advocacy groups, she helped implement new systems that made the show a model for inclusive entertainment. Her declining vision and hearing, rather than limiting her work, gave her unique insights into the challenges faced by people with disabilities and the innovations needed to serve them better. Dr. Chen kept her promise. Her Nobel Prize acceptance speech, delivered in both spoken English and American Sign Language, was dedicated to interpreters worldwide. She established a scholarship fund for deaf students pursuing careers in STEM fields, and Lisa Williams was named to the fund's advisory board. But perhaps the most lasting impact of that night came from something simpler: the thousands of viewers who learned their first sign language phrase while watching The Tonight Show. Many of them went on to take full courses, volunteer with deaf organizations, or simply become more aware of the communication barriers that exist in their communities. Lisa's story became a reminder that disability doesn't mean inability, that endings can be beginnings, and that the most important bridges we build are the ones that help others cross from isolation to inclusion. And every night, as The Tonight Show aired with its new accessibility features, Lisa would remember that Tuesday evening when her world changed, not because her hearing was failing, but because a television studio full of strangers learned to speak her language, if only to say thank you. Because sometimes the most important conversations happen in silence, and sometimes the most powerful words are the ones we make with our hands.